All right, hi everyone. This is the start of the water lecture. It is chapter 11 in the book. And so what I do want you to know is water is the medium of life. That is what we're going to call it, and we'll explain that in just a slide or two. So there'll be 7 short videos for this section. Okay, so as we move along here, um, Miller and Spoolman always start with a little story of some kind of disaster or events that are happening that relates to the topic. And so we want to introduce the first one. It's called a dead zone. And the Gulf of Mexico is one area here off the United States that has, and there has a dead zone. And there's many of them around the world. But anyway, so what we're looking at here is the dead zone is in the Gulf of Mexico. This is because of runoff of the Mississippi River. What I want you to realize is the Mississippi River Basin is actually fed by 31 different states. You can see kind of the blue area here. That's more than half of the U.S. cropland. So one of the problems we have is the way we fertilize. And we'll talk about fertilizers later. Well, all those fertilizers that are not absorbed by the crops are passed along as runoff, either because of rain or irrigation practices, and that will all end up in the river, which eventually ends up in the Gulf of Mexico. So I want you to key in nitrates and phosphates, those two things, nitrates and phosphates. Again, they're fertilizers. So when they hit the ocean, there's phytoplankton. And phytoplankton is basically organisms that release, that are photosynthetic. They're not plants, they're kind of like plants. And what they do is they bloom and they explode, and that's called eutrophication. Eutrophication. So you want to know that word too, eutrophication. That's where you have this explosion of an organism. And so that leads to eventually those will die off, and when they die off, they sink. And there's bacteria then that break them down. That bacteria uses oxygen. When all the oxygen gets used up in the ocean, what happens then is we have die-offs of fish, shellfish, crayfish, lobster, clams, all kinds of different things. And so it's this vicious cycle. So we do want you to realize that. And we have that locally. We have it at the Salton Sea. If you've ever been out there, they have fish die-offs all the time. We also have it at our oceans. It does actually happen here off our coast. All right, water is the medium of life. That is the principle we want you to know and memorize, page 86, number 20. And, you can see here in the picture, water comes in 3 states: liquid, gas, and solid. And so I want you to think about this. We're going to use this as a principle. All water, as we know, all life as we know it, is keyed to water. Even if you really pay attention, we went to Mars and we're looking for life. But if you kind of look closer and listen to the scientists, they were really, obviously they're looking for life. That would be a big, huge discovery. But what they were really looking for was water first. They were looking for water because our understanding of life is life does need water. All right, so these are some answers that from the study guide. So I just want to kind of key you in as you're watching this. You might want to have that study guide. 71% of the surface of the Earth is covered with water, and I think we know that. I think we've heard that. But most of it's salt water, which is not really usable for us. You can't survive. You can survive, several weeks without food. I question that. I can't survive a couple hours, but that's kind of the concept, that if you really had to, you could, but you could only probably maybe 3 days without water before you die. And so water is extremely important. 1 in 10 people do not have access to clean water, and that's just blows my mind. We are, unfortunately for us, I guess, is we are kind of isolated from that issue. And if you look at the bottom number, 0.024% is actually liquid fresh water that we can use. So although there is water all over the planet, not all of it is usable. Don't memorize all of this, but the amazing thing is that 57% of the world have water piped to their homes. So there's over 40% that don't. We take that for granted here in the United States. The number here that I do ask on this on the study guide is how many people die from infectious diseases. That's 669,000 people just because on average die just because of lack of a safe drinking water. We find ourselves here in the United States very lucky in that regard. All right, so where are the water problems? There's actually lots of water on the planet. It's just not distributed evenly. And if you notice, the red is the place you don't want to live. Wait a minute, that is where we're living. We live in an area that is high stress. We have water. We have water that is not stable, and we have been living through some severe droughts. And you can see Northern Africa and the Middle East, where there's tons of water or no water stress. You can see in Canada. So there are places close to us, and Europe again doesn't have a lot of problems, but there are a lot of places that do. All right, fresh water is the most usable form of water for man, and salt water is the least usable. So that's another principle we want you to memorize. And again, salt water, although it's important, I don't want to discount it. I mean, there's obviously animals that live in it and things like that. But for humans, as humans in the environment, it is really fresh water is the form. And again, there is a very limited amounts. And so what we would like you to know is the hydrologic cycle. Now, I'm not overly concerned that you memorize everything on the picture, but what I want you to realize is water is a finite resource, and that's going to be our next principle. But it's all kind of tied in together. So when it rains, water comes down and we collect it and use it, or it gets in the ground, goes into the groundwater, runs off, eventually hits the ocean. But then we have evaporation that gets water back up into the air, and then it condenses, and then we get rain clouds, and it comes back to the planet. So it's all one big cycle. So I want you to know the term hydrologic cycle for our water cycle. And then here's the principle I mentioned. Water is a finite, and this is a longer one, so it's going to take you a little bit to memorize, and we can talk about practices like that at our next discussion. But water is a finite resource, renewed and regulated in its various states, in cycles, in a global cycle, driven by evaporation and precipitation. So down here in the picture, you can see it's all one big kind of these cells with wind and water, and our rainfall is actually tied into the tropical rainforest, because that kind of drives these cells. And what we're finding out, and we'll talk about later, is as we deforest the planet, we're finding that this hydrologic cycle is changing, that we are getting less evaporation, and so which means we're getting less precipitation, we're getting more desertification, which is more deserts. Deserts are expanding. So everything we do has an impact. So again, I want you to realize that it is a finite resource. And if we start using it as trash, pollute it, that comes back on us, because that is all the water we have. And so we want to use it wisely. And we will stop with the first